Hello everyone, my name's Charlie. I'm one of the BSOG event coordinators. Thank you so much for joining. Sorry my camera's not on. I'm currently on the Isle of Man in student accommodation, and Wi-Fi just is not my friend today. Just before we start, I've put it in the chat, but to let everyone know that we'll be recording this webinar to go on the BSOG website. So if you wanted to keep your camera off or turn it off, then please go ahead with that. So just to introduce our lovely speaker today, so to mark this year's Baby Loss Awareness Week, we're so delighted to have Munira here. She is the director of the Ectopic Pregnancy Trust, and she has personal and professional experience of baby loss. And she's going to speak about how we can support those who've suffered baby and pregnancy loss. So Munira, whenever you're ready, take it away for us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to the BSOG team for having me today. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. And specifically, Charlie, thank you for all the tech questions this morning and afternoon to help me arrive here today. I've been very proficient with Zoom and Teams, but this is my first for Medal, so bear with me while I get used to this new platform. I'm here from the Ectopic Pregnancy Trust, as Charlie said. My name is Munira, and I'm here to talk about pregnancy and baby loss, which is a very difficult subject. None of us really want to be here talking about it, but the sad reality is it's a common experience that many people go through, and it's important to have this debate and conversation. I'm going to share my slides in a moment, but I also have the chat there open, so if there are any questions or comments that come up, I'll try my best to juggle on. Perhaps at the end, Charlie, we might wrap up some questions or comments at the end if that transpires. Yeah. So everyone say a deep breath while I try sharing my screen on this platform for the first time. Right, let's see, drum roll, please. Okay. Now, Charlie, is that coming up? Can you say yes or no? Because I now can't see you. Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
I've got a big smile on my face.
Fantastic. I'm cheering inwardly, so that's good news. Now I can't see any comments or anything like that now, so we'll probably have to have comments and questions at the end. This talk today is about pregnancy and baby loss, and I know it's called Baby Loss Awareness Week, but I use the phrase pregnancy and baby loss from the very outset because people consider loss differently. Some people will use the term baby, some people will use the term pregnancy, and although the week is badged as Baby Loss Awareness Week, I think it's important to recognise that the range of terminology that people can use. And along those lines, I've got 5 key messages for today. I'll be talking about the week itself. I'll also be talking about the types and incidents of pregnancy and baby loss. Then we'll have a little bit of a discussion, which might be a bit tricky because I can't see the discussion now, but let's see if we can tag team it, Charlie, if that's okay. But we'll have a discussion on the impacts of pregnancy and baby loss. Then I've got 2 case studies, Mel and Dave, and I'll explain a little bit more about what we're aiming to do with that when we get to those case studies. And finally, I'll just wrap up with the work of the Ectopic Pregnancy Trust and how we can support you and your patients as well, because we're very keen to work collaboratively with healthcare professionals to support families who experience pregnancy loss through ectopic pregnancy. So, turning to the week itself, this is actually the 20th year of Baby Loss Awareness Week in the UK, and I have very mixed feelings about that. The fact that we've reached a 20-year milestone is remarkable, but also saddening at the same time, the fact that that we exist. And the theme for this year is stepping stones. And the Alliance is an alliance of about 100 charities, and there on the screen you can see the logos of the 6 main charities that lead the week. So SANS is at the forefront, and along with SANS as part of the working group, we've got Bliss, the Ectopic Pregnancy Trust, the Lullaby Trust, the Miscarriage Association, and Tommy. And along with those 6 organisations who do the leading, there are over 100 other organisations now that mark Baby Loss Awareness Week. So you'll see a lot in the press, a lot in social media about the week. And it's the week to commemorate our losses, and it's for everyone in the pregnancy and baby loss community and beyond. And importantly, it's also to raise awareness of the impact of loss, the importance that bereavement support plays, and of the vital work that's needed to improve outcomes and to save babies' lives. So the EPT has been a founding member since inception, so we've been around since for the past 20 years, and we're at the forefront of commemorating babies lost through ectopic pregnancy. I personally sit on the working group, and my colleague sits on the MARCOMS group, and that's to ensure that the voices of people who experience pregnancy loss is included in the narrative. Often, ectopic pregnancy is either conflated with miscarriage, or it's the loss aspect is not considered because it's a highly medicalized experience and a condition where a woman's life is at risk. The loss aspect of the pregnancy is sometimes glossed over or even missed altogether. And so we are here to remind people that along with the huge range of emotions that people will experience when they have ectopic pregnancy, that there could also, and is likely to be in a lot of instances, grief associated with that as well. And that can be the case whether a pregnancy is planned or not. The Baby Loss Awareness Week culminates on the 15th of October with the Wave of Light, and it's a really moving experience. At 7 o'clock in the evening, wherever anyone is located, they light a candle and leave that to burn for an hour. And on social media, you'll see that wave crossing across the globe from Australia onwards. And when we get to us here in the UK at 7 o'clock, you'll see all the social media outlets light up with a candle to mark the wave of light, to remember all those pregnancies and babies that are lost. So what is pregnancy and baby loss? Well, we know it can occur in many ways, and it starts at the earliest gestations, end of gestation, but also at the other end of the spectrum with sudden infant death and SIDS. And I'm just going to go over very quickly the many ways in which a couple, a person, can experience pregnancy and baby loss. Ectopic pregnancy is where a fertilized egg implants and grows outside the cavity of the uterus. Most commonly, it's in a fallopian tube. More than 95% of ectopic pregnancies are in a fallopian tube. And unfortunately, the pregnancy can't be moved or saved. And of course, it's a life-threatening condition for a woman if it's not diagnosed and treated quickly. So it's a very complex set of circumstances that happen. A miscarriage is an intrauterine pregnancy, and where the pregnancy, the baby, the fetus, the embryo, many multitude ways in which people might describe their pregnancy, where that dies in the uterus anytime up to 23 weeks and 6 days. Stillbirth is when a baby is born dead after 24 weeks of pregnancy. And as you'll know, there is that distinction pre-24 weeks and post-24 weeks. And post-24 weeks, there is registration and circumstances around that, which is not the case for anything prior to the 24-week mark. Abortion and termination, again, that can happen for a number of reasons. It could be an unplanned pregnancy, but it can also be because of a fetal anomaly that's been located as a part of a scan. And that's where a woman or a couple might be given a choice to end a pregnancy. A very difficult and heart-wrenching choice, of course. A early pregnancy is where an abnormal fertilized egg is in the uterus and the cells grow too quickly that should have become the placenta, and it takes over the space where the embryo would develop. And that can be a situation where the cells are actually tested for cancer as well. So that could be cancerous, and there could be a situation where a woman is dealing with a possible cancer diagnosis or circumstance, along with losing a pregnancy as well. So again, many layered loss. Neonatal loss is where a baby is born at any time during pregnancy who lives, even briefly, but dies within 4 weeks of being born. And sudden infant death is where a baby dies suddenly and unexpectedly when no cause is found. And there in the brackets, you can see where I've picked up all those definitions from. We've talked about the types of loss, and now let's talk about numbers. So it's very common, unfortunately. Ectopic pregnancy affects around 1 in 80 pregnancies, which is not a small number. 12,000 emergency admissions per year, but anecdotally, because of the way that figures and stats are recorded, the discrepancies in that, the misdiagnosis with miscarriage and lots of complicating factors, we think that actually the figure is probably more than 30,000 per year. Miscarriage is very common as well. 1 in 4, 1 in 5 pregnancies are lost due to miscarriage, and that's possibly up to 250,000 pregnancies per year. Stillbirth and neonatal death is also alarmingly common. Around 13 babies per day die before, soon, or during birth. Sudden infant death, 200 babies approximately die per year. And there are over 200,000 abortions reported in England and Wales, and that was a figure from the government back in 2020. Now, risk factors is a very big topic, and I'm not proposing going into detail here at all, but I just want to touch upon some of the very common risk factors that we know about. So, of course, smoking is a very commonly known one, and there's actually also a link, a risk factor between smoking and ectopic pregnancy as well. And with the later gestations, there's also a risk of smoking and pregnancy and baby loss. Other factors are alcohol consumption, age, primarily maternal age, long-term health conditions, infections, and physiological conditions as well, like the tubal structure. We don't exactly know why an ectopic pregnancy happens, but at the very least, we can say it's likely to be something to do with the underlying structure of the workings of a fallopian tube. Womb structure, weakened cervix, polycystic ovaries, there are other physiological conditions that can contribute to risk factors of pregnancy and baby loss. Now, while risk factors are, from a clinical point of view, yes, they're important, we want to minimize them, and we want to minimize the risk of people going through pregnancy and baby loss. It's very difficult, almost impossible, to have a straight line in any individual cases as to why someone has experienced pregnancy and baby loss. And I would argue it's actually really complicated from an emotional point of view, because even if a risk factor is identified, the emotional impacts of that for the woman or the person who's experienced the loss could include guilt, blame, and fears. We hear of that all the time with ectopic pregnancy, where people seize upon a risk factor, email us and say, that's why I had the ectopic pregnancy and I'm racked with guilt and blame and I caused this. So although risk factors are important and we need to understand them from a clinical point of view and from a management point of view, we also do need to understand the psychological impacts that those terms can have for people as well. So it is a fine line, but we do need to be open about these risk factors, but also sensitive to the emotional fallout as well. Now, the next part of this is it's going to be a little bit complicated because I can't see the screen, but I want to share this image and I want to stimulate a discussion. I want to stimulate a conversation around the impacts of pregnancy and baby loss. And this is an illustration that was produced by someone that we supported here at the Ectopic Pregnancy Trust. And although this image is specifically around ectopic pregnancy, I think there are themes here that can actually translate across various types of pregnancy and baby loss. So I'm just going to leave this screen up here for a minute, and I'd like everyone to just have a think about the impacts of pregnancy and baby loss on people who experience loss. And then Charlie, if you can still hear me, hopefully I haven't lost a connection. Can you still hear me okay, Charlie?
I'm here. I'm here, can you hear me?
I can hear you, great.
Yeah.
So would it be okay if after a couple of minutes, or a couple of seconds, not a couple of minutes, I ask you to just let me know what people are saying?
Yeah, if anybody wants to put any comments in the chat, that'll be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just allow a few seconds again. What are the impacts of pregnancy and baby loss? And if you imagine this woman sat in a bed, what do you think she is going through? And Charlie, when you start to see comments coming up, please do feel free to shout out.
I can kickstart it off. Oh, someone said probably feeling incredibly alone. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Vanilla said isolation.
Great, thank you.
Kevin said may feel worried that this will happen again.
Yeah.
Bethany said grief and fear. Thomas has said guilt. Someone else has said self-doubt. Viola said depression, anxiety, guilt.
Yeah.
I think for me as well, looking at this, obviously it's all the emotions, but also it's a woman who's pretty unwell herself.
Yeah.
I think that's, so Bethany just said, yeah, physical aspects to the pain.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone wants to add a couple more, please feel free to carry on and adding. But my next slide covers many of those aspects that you've so eloquently described today. And you're absolutely right. There's the physical aspects of what the woman or the person is going through. And you've talked about the loss of the pregnancy and the baby, of course. There could be surgical treatment and the associated recovery with that. Of course, there could be medical treatment with a drug. And that can be the case in, for example, for a miscarriage or for ectopic pregnancy. There could be conservative management and recovery and worries that are associated with that. Complications, we hear from people who sometimes don't even have been discharged, and I find myself quite shocked that I'm saying this, but are not discharged with basic wound care, and who email us with information about what's happening with their wound sites. And of course, the first thing that we do is say to go and get themselves in front of a doctor. So treatment complications can be an ongoing impact as well. Ongoing pain, again, that's something that we hear about. Worries about subfertility and infertility, excuse me. Picking up on some of the emotional aspects, and we've talked about grief, anger at the situation, at themselves, at their partner even, or just anger in general. It could just be a feeling of angry at the world, and that's something that I certainly felt after my own experiences. Fears, I know that somebody mentioned that in the list earlier, worries about the future. Guilt and blame, we've already talked about that. Some people might even feel a sense of relief. Certainly with ectopic pregnancy, we hear from people who are relieved that they are alive and find that there's a tension between feeling the relief that they are alive, but the loss of the pregnancy. And that can be very confusing. All of this can be very confusing. It can have an ongoing impact on relationships. And it's important to remember that it's not just the person or the woman who experiences the loss, but the partner does as well. And the impacts can be far reaching. Someone mentioned mental health issues, and with early pregnancy loss, there's an increased risk of PTS, anxiety, and depression. I think statistically it's about 1 in 3 women show signs of those conditions, and 1 in 12 partners show signs of those mental health issues as well. So the impacts can be far reaching. And even if we're not talking about mental health issues like PTS, depression, or anxiety, the grief and the course of recovery in itself can cause a huge strain too. And I've just talked about the risk of PTS, depression, and anxiety as well. I wanted to share with you some first-hand experiences of those impacts that we've talked about. And I am going to read this out because I think they are really impactful. So the first one is from someone who didn't have surgical treatment. And from what I remember, I think this woman had methotrexate treatment. And she says, emotionally, I'm shattered. I'm terrified of this happening again. I'm so sad and I'm worried that my tubes are blocked. My cycles are so out of whack. I have no solid ground. I'm bleeding on and off, and I just don't know what's happening to my body. The second one there is a woman who's had surgical treatment. So she took 2 frustrating weeks off work. I was pretty much bedridden and sought solace in books and chocolate buttons, tending to my scars and wishing the painful swelling and gas to go down. Seriously, at one point, I looked at least 8 months pregnant. I won it and not much fun. Some take longer than 2 weeks. In fact, they recommend 4. But everyone has their own path of recovery, and it's so important not to push your body or your brain. And the last one was a woman who had expectant management. I'm so utterly terrified. Every time I bleed, the breast pain stops and I think it's all over, but then it starts again a couple of days later. The waiting is too much. I'm not coping. I think what this really brings home to me, and I say it time and time again, that with treatment, whatever the treatment route, they're all pretty horrendous. And I'm speaking from a position of ectopic pregnancy here. As you can read there and have heard there, people talk about being terrified, particularly if they're having non-surgical treatment and are worried still about rupture, their cycles being out of whack, and worried about the condition of their tubes, of their fallopian tubes. And that can be the case if someone's had surgical treatment as well. If they've had a fallopian tube removed, they'll be worried about the state of that remaining fallopian tube as well. That swelling and that gas to go down and looking pregnant, I mean, that's going to be painful and uncomfortable and upsetting as well. And this really brings home to me, these first-hand experiences and my own experience, the physical and the emotional impact of pregnancy and baby loss. And again, this is through the lens of ectopic pregnancy, but I think much of this could also be similar themes for people who experience other types of loss as well. This is our poster of emotions, and you can find this in early pregnancy units up and down the country. So we signpost to our services, which I'll go on later to talk about. We signpost to our services in early pregnancy units because we understand that when you've experienced a loss, the physical aspect is a part of it, but we also need to recognize and support people through that emotional recovery as well. And to read more about experiences of bereaved parents, you can have a look at a report that came out that was a part of Baby Loss Awareness Week before the pandemic over in 2019, where we and a lot of other charities also, we input into this report, but there was a debate in Parliament about supporting people who experience pregnancy and baby loss, because the overall theme from all the charities is that the psychological and emotional care after the loss isn't there. And that's not because of a lack of want. We know that as healthcare professionals, you do an incredible job supporting families when they go through one of the most heartbreaking experiences in their lives. You've only got a certain number of hours, you've only got certain resources. We think that there's a big picture point here that needs to be addressed from top down in terms of funding, resources, training, and I'll come on to, actually it's my next slide, come on to something that's an initiative that we've been a part of. So there are 5 bereavement care pathways. So although there are gaps and it's patchy, what we're hoping for is that these bereavement care pathways can be rolled out up and down the country across hospitals, so that anyone who experiences loss is supported through their hospital journey and beyond. And the bereavement care pathways are 5 in number. There's 1 for miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy, and we were instrumental in helping to draft that. And I've also very recently helped with the update. I think that was unveiled just a few weeks ago. So that's been, I think they've all been updated just a few weeks ago, actually. So there's a miscarriage and ectopic pregnancy pathway. There's 1 for TOPFA, termination of pregnancy for fetal anomaly. There's 1 for stillbirth, neonatal death, and sudden unexpected death in infancy as well. So please do have a look at those links, do have a look at the pathway and familiarise yourselves with them, because they are incredible resources, and we do really need to be using them. From all the charities that I work with, fundamentally, we really want to work with healthcare professionals to support families who go through this. So now I want to talk about a few experiences that we've come across. And I wanted to just give a snapshot of a woman called Mel, who we've come across. And I'll just explain a little bit about Mel. And then I have another few questions for you, which again, Charlie, if it's okay, I'll tag team with you and we can talk about the case study in tandem, if that's all right. Yeah,
that'd be great.
Super, thanks so much. I don't know what I'd do without you, Charlie. So this is Mel. I'd like to introduce you to Mel. She's 37 years old and she's a woman. She's been trying to conceive for many months and it's ended in ectopic pregnancy. She's had methotrexate treatment at 5 weeks and 4 days. And the emotions that she described to us in her email were, I'm shattered, terrified of this happening again, sad and worried that the tubes are blocked, guilt, failure, disoriented, confused. At age 37, she feels that time is running out, and she's been told that she has a diminished ovarian reserve. She already has irregular cycles, and she has bleeding on and off. And her questions to us were, what are my chances of a healthy pregnancy? Why did this happen? Should I just give up? Is this going to happen again? And will I heal emotionally? So my first question to you is, what would you not say to Mel? So just as important as the language that we do use, what should we not say to Mel? If you'd like to pop those in the chat, and then Charlie, whenever you're ready, just shout them at me.
Yeah, well.
Thank you.
I can start by saying that you definitely wouldn't want to say definitive answers, because I guess you don't really know at the start. Fenella has said, shouldn't just tell her everything is going to be okay, have to acknowledge her concerns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bethany said, saying anything to minimise her experience and emotions.
Absolutely.
Ruya, I hope I haven't butchered your name. She said, shouldn't say anything that blames her.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Nothing else in the comments so far.
Those are excellent suggestions, and a few other ones that come to my mind are the at least phrases. So the at least you got pregnant, that's one that we hear, or at least it was early. That's not helpful either. Yes, you're right in the sense that it's difficult to be definitive about the questions that she's asked because there are so many factors here. But you're absolutely right in supporting her in all of the questions that she's got, and she's disoriented. She used that word herself. So supporting her in her difficult emotions is absolutely important.
We've got another one. So Anna said, not discussing future plans or attempts. She may not be ready for that, and or let her lead on that as well.
Yeah, fundamentally right. Let her lead on that. She's already said, what are my chances of a healthy pregnancy? So you're absolutely right that she needs to be supported at her own pace. And I remember when I had our ectopic pregnancy, I went in for my follow-up, and my follow-up was with a member of the consultant's team. And at the end of that follow-up, the consultant actually popped in and said hello. And I remember him standing in front of me saying, almost, with a shrug, oh, you're young, you'll go and try again and you'll be fine. Give it a month and try again. And I just had a whole half an hour with his colleague talking about this really distressing experience that I'd gone through. And the last thing I wanted to hear is, oh, go and try again, you'll be okay. So you're absolutely right that sort of suggestion when someone is not quite necessarily ready for that conversation is absolutely right. We can't fix it. And unfortunately, we have to sit here with Mel, with her grief, with her worries, and help work through that. And you can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. It's about all of us working together to support Mel in her emotions, as difficult as they are, so that she can process them and work through them to reduce that risk of PTS, depression, and anxiety, and to give her body and her mind the best chance it can have for any future pregnancy as well. So along those lines, what would you say to Mel? And again, I'll just give it a couple of minute or two for people to put things in the chat. Are there any phrases that have come through yet, Charlie?
Fenella has said, how can we best support you?
Yeah, that's a really good open question. And chances are she might not know, but just saying that you're there to support her in the way that she would like just means the world in its own right. So even though she might not be able to provide a coherent answer, the fact that you've offered to support her in the way and put her front and center of her own experience speaks volumes. So thank you for that.
I think maybe as well, being as empathetic as possible, but without saying, when people say, oh, I can understand how you feel. Well, I think, unless you've been through that experience, you can't really say that. So saying something like, oh, I just can't imagine what you're feeling right now, or even asking them, do you want to talk about how you're feeling right now?
Yeah.
Just show that you are feeling that empathy.
Totally right. Yeah, we avoid that. We avoid saying, I know exactly how you're feeling, because we don't. Everyone's circumstances are different. Everyone's reactions will be different. So we won't know exactly how someone is feeling, but we can say, ask the question, how are you feeling? And I don't know exactly how you're feeling, but I can sit with you in whatever that might look like. And even simply saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're going through this. I'm sorry that this has happened. That in itself, so many people we speak to, hearing those words mean a lot and go a long way to feeling supported. Does anyone have anything else on that they want to bring up?
Nothing else in the comments so far.
Okay, so let's move on to Dave in that case. Dave is a husband and they've been married for 3 years and they've been together for 12 and recently decided to try to conceive. He and his wife have learned that she has an ectopic pregnancy and the wife has been admitted to hospital for treatment. He is concerned and upset. He's worried about the risk to his wife's health and for what should have been a happy first conception. He feels devastated that the pregnancy is going to fail with no resolution, and he wants to stay strong for his wife and hopes to try again and not be discouraged. And his question to us asks for best action to support his wife through a difficult time. And I want to ask those same 2 questions. What would you, first of all, not say to Dave? And I'll give you a few minutes while I have a bit of water. And again, Charlie, just let me know as and when any comments come through. Any comments through yet?
Nothing come through yet.
Okay.
I will say that I've been lucky enough to meet some patients through Tommy's, who've been helped with through Tommy's, and we did speak to one of the partners, and he spoke a lot about how he felt such a lack of support, and that if just from both of them in general, him and his partner, but when all the comments that were directed towards her of any feeling of sympathy were all towards her. And he said none of his friends even went to acknowledge the fact that he also had lost his child as well.
Absolutely, and that's precisely why I have put Dave's case study up here, because I want to bring to everyone's mind, please do not forget the partners. They are going through their own complex emotions and need support as well. And far too often, they are sidelined or ignored altogether. So you're absolutely right. That just emphasizes exactly why I wanted to have a partner's perspective here today. So the sorts of things I wouldn't say to Dave is, you've got to be the strong one. Because what does that even mean? I think we're, as a society, moving away from that anyway. But it just goes to show that that pull, that societal expectation is still there, because his words to us were, "I want to stay strong for my wife." So, as much as we try and say, it's okay for you to not be okay, I think that that pull to be the strong one is still there. But what we can do is challenge that, and similar things. I would say, not to say to Dave, "Don't worry, it'll be okay next time," because he says he's upset about the fact that this would have been or should have been a happy first conception. So to then say, "Oh, don't worry, it'll be okay next time," we have no guarantee of that, and I'm sure nobody on this call today would be saying anything along those lines anyway. So let's move on to what we would say, because I appreciate it's difficult to say what we wouldn't say, because I think there's a little person on our shoulder telling us what we shouldn't be saying to Dave. So let's bring out into the open, what should we be saying to Dave at this point in time? What are his actions to support his wife through this difficult time?
Yeah, just while we're waiting for anyone to sort of chip in, to say, obviously, to remind him that there is support out there for him as well, and that whilst that he will want to support his partner, he needs to make sure he looks after himself as well, which I think is especially hard when it is a male partner. They might find it harder to admit that they're struggling.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's really at the forefront of it, that you will need support as well, and it's okay to recognize that, and it's okay to ask for that as well. I think from a partner's perspective, it's quite a unique one, in the sense that they haven't physically experienced the loss, and yet, of course, it is their loss as well, but they're also worried about their wife as well. And I know that when it came to our ectopic pregnancy, it felt like my husband was going back to his normal life really quickly, and I was really, really upset about that. I'm normally quite a calm person, but on this occasion, I screamed until I was blue in the face at him, and I was all kinds of crying, and I said that he didn't care. But the reality is, for him, when I went in for surgery, that's when his worst fears were there. He was living through his worst nightmare, he said to me. And he said he was that man who was walking up and down outside the corridor, wondering whether his wife was going to come out alive again. So when I was out and I was alive, his recovery was over. He said, "I'm alive, so he's moving on. It's okay." Whereas for me, I was still reeling from the fact that we lost our pregnancy, and I was physically broken and emotionally broken. But my husband, it felt like he was like Teflon, like nothing fazed him. But only after time now, and he actually openly admitted to me that for him it wasn't the loss of the pregnancy, because for him it was, we could try again. For him, it was the fact that he nearly lost his wife, and that's where his focus was. But for a lot of partners, it is the loss of the pregnancy as well. which is what Dave here has expressed. And best action to support wife, I would say, look after yourself. Perhaps you could together use support services so that it's not just him supporting his wife, but through accessing support services together. That way they both get the support. And they can do that either as a couple on a phone call or individually. But I think it's important to emphasize that the support is there for him as well.
Yeah, and Bethany said signpost to baby loss charities for support for both of them.
Absolutely right. Thank you, Bethany. Fantastic. If there's nothing more, I will go on to what we do here. So thank you to Bethany for the link. So we're here to provide that support. We're here to provide that ongoing support for and information for anyone who experiences ectopic pregnancy loss. And I've just put up on screen there a couple of screenshots of our website. The one on the left shows you what is an ectopic pregnancy and things like symptoms, diagnosis, treatment, recovery. What we find, what we hear a lot of is after someone's experienced ectopic pregnancy, because it happens so fast and it's so often an emergency situation, they're putting the pieces of what's happened together after the event. And there are so many questions afterwards. So we know that as healthcare professionals, you've got limited time, you've got limited resources, you've got the next emergency or you've got the next ectopic pregnancy walking through your door. So you can only do so much in terms of answering those questions. Please do signpost people to us and look at our information as well yourselves to find answers to those questions that come up very often after someone's had an ectopic pregnancy loss. And on the right hand side screenshot there, I've got the professional section there flagged up, and it shows dedicated sections to our leaflets, which is the information that we provide to hospitals up and down the country. And those leaflets are given to patients at the point of diagnosis. So it answers lots of questions about ectopic pregnancy. There's a leaflet about the different treatment options, so it's part tailored to what they're going through. There's also a leaflet about a pregnancy of unknown location, if that's what they're going through, and it's signposted to our resources as well. So that's a physical pack that you're handing over to someone, and with that handing over, you're showing that you care. You're giving them something, like those hands on our screenshot that you can see there. You're equipping people, saying, I care for what you've been through, and I care that you get the support and information that you need. So please do, when you're out and about in the field, please do talk about the leaflets that we have. We've also got sections about guidance. That's NICE guidance, Green Top guidelines are there, the bereavement care pathway is there, or the sensitive disposal of pregnancy remains, that's there as well. There's lots of information there about guidance. We've got reports, Embrace reports, the Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch's report, which was on ectopic pregnancy just before COVID. You'll find that there as well. We've also collaborated a lot with the likes of the RCN, lots of other charities as well, this Alliance, this Baby Loss Awareness Week. You'll find the information about that there as well. And finally, the research that we have funded and supported. All of our information is evidence-based, it's peer-reviewed. We've got world-renowned trustees and medical advisors like Andrew Horn, Siobhan Quenby, Tom Bourne. We've got the great and the good in the field of early pregnancy and ectopic pregnancy as our trustees and medical advisors. And we are a trusted resource by the NHS. Almost every hospital up and down the country, bar a handful, either give our leaflets out or signpost to our services. And in fact, we're on the NHS website as well, and the BBC signpost to us too. And this is first-hand experience of what a difference our information gives. I'm currently in hospital, had emergency surgery for an EP today, can't get to sleep, and found your website on the NHS pages. From what I've read, you've answered so many questions swirling around my mind, I finally feel I can get some rest. The nurses here are lovely, but it's busy and hard to just blurt out what seem random questions. So your pages are exactly what I needed to be able to process the information. Where am I? Concern, I burst into tears talking to someone. Thank you so much again. It might seem a bit silly saying all this, but if I hadn't have found your site, I know I wouldn't be resting, and that's exactly what I need right now. Been a long day. That really summarizes why that information is so important. It helps your patients get rest, and it helps answer their questions, and that's a good thing. And the support that we provide, again, I've just flagged up the supporting you section on our website. It talks about physical recovery, emotional recovery, people's feelings, partners, what's going to happen in the workplace, trying to conceive again, because of course there are going to be worries when people are thinking about trying again, and our support services too. And on the right hand side there, you can see a snapshot of the various types of support that we provide. Through our discussion forum, our telephone support line, we've got email exchanges, we've got a virtual support group through Zoom. We actually did virtual support groups before COVID. We've been doing it for a couple of years before. Because we're such a small charity, we didn't do face-to-face in a room, but we did do it through Skype back then. We've just migrated to Zoom, and we've been doing this for a while now. So please do tell anyone who needs us of our support services. It's a dedicated space for ectopic pregnancy. That is what we focus on. There are other charities that focus on miscarriage, and even the Miscarriage Association actually signposts people to us for support for ectopic pregnancy. It's empathic, it's person-focused, it's not time limited. We're here for as long as anyone needs us, and it's peer-to-peer support from people who understand something of what others are going through. And this is someone that we supported. I just want to say how awesome you guys are as a charity and support group network. I'm a father who not physically suffered an ectopic pregnancy, but having to watch my wife struggle and nearly die was horrific. So a massive thank you for the support we were given. It helped us cope and come through everything stronger. These are the 3 last images that I'm going to share with you, which show the power of one of our support calls. So we got this email and we asked an illustrator to put some pictures to the words that we got in this email. So I called the EPT while curled up in a ball on my kitchen floor where I had been for hours. I screamed down the phone at one point. I have no recollection of what I said or who I spoke to. But I remember that by the end of the call, I was standing up. And I think that says it all. For more information, please do visit our website, ectopic.org.uk, and please do visit the Baby Loss Awareness Week website, babyloss-awareness.org. Thank you ever so much for having me today. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you so much, Munira. For everyone's giving you a virtual round of applause. That was so interesting, very touching. I'm so glad you spoke about how it impacts as well. I think that's something really important to think about as future or current clinicians. And I'll also make sure to post the links to the resources that you provide on our social media if everybody wants to look at that. What Finella said, thank you so much. I don't even see the comments now.
Yeah, I can. I'm back.
Oh, good. Good. So thank you as well, everyone, for joining and for your contributions. I really hope you've enjoyed the talk. Please feel free to ask any questions in the comments with Munira. And if you have any feedback, we'll be sending out a form, or you can get in touch if you'd like. And also just a reminder that we are recruiting for our ambassadors. So look at our social media or websites if you're interested. So I'll just have a little wait to see if anybody has any questions. Everyone's saying thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining this really important subject today. I'm really touched that so many joined on your evening, your precious time, and you've chosen to be here with me today. And please know that we're so keen to work with you as you support patients going forward.
Great. I think, so yeah, I don't think if there's any more questions, then.
Okay.
Thank you so much for speaking. That was really wonderful.
Thank you so much, Charlie, and thank you for your patience earlier today and for having me join your fantastic team at Medall and Buself as well. It's been great to speak to you all. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.